Growing up in rural Michigan, I found there was hardly anything to do. If you enjoy staring at trees and crops with lots of alone time, then that was the place to be. I left as soon as I got a car and enough money to move. I'm not a nature hater or anything, but I'd choose to be by a big city any day. My parents don't own that property anymore, they sold it years ago. To describe it, it was an acre property with a pretty big house and a storage building out back. I was young when this happened. My parents often left me alone at this age because they trusted me. I matured early and had responsibilities on the property. One weekend, I was playing Vice City on my PS in the living room when suddenly a loud metallic bang came from outside in the yard. I immediately ran to every window I could find, hoping to see something. It wasn't until I got to the window looking out to the storage building out back that I noticed the door was completely open. I immediately grabbed the rifle from the closet and went outside, making my presence known by shouting, "Who's in there?" but got no response. When I got to the door, I announced that I had a gun before looking inside. There was a bunch of stuff in there, from the sit-down mower to the quad and infinite little lawn care items. Someone could have been hiding behind any of that stuff. Even as a kid, I didn't scare easily, but at that moment, I was really unsettled. So, I closed the door to the building and went back inside the house. I locked the door and sat at the window for the longest time, watching the storage building and expecting the door to open at any second. That door was heavy and impossible to just open by itself. It was simply a fact that someone came and opened it. Whether they were still inside the building, I wasn't sure. I decided to call my dad and ask his opinion. I went to the kitchen to the landline phone and called my dad's cell phone. He didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. This was back when you'd still have to leave someone a voicemail because texting wasn't mainstream. After that, I went back to sitting next to the window but now put on a TV show in the background to make this less monotonous. I took the phone with me. I was probably about to give up when I heard creaks from upstairs. My heart was now in my throat. I had to ask myself the big question. Was I working myself up, or was someone here? I had a serious guard dog mentality. Even if I didn't love that place, I saw it as mine, my family's, and I had to protect it, but I was in over my head. I grabbed the rifle again and walked upstairs. I didn't say anything. Calling out would only alert a potential intruder that I heard them. I made it to the top of the stairs and turned on the light for the upstairs hallway. There were 5 doors to open, all of them closed, 4 led to bedrooms, and 1 led to the bathroom. Each door had a decently large crack underneath that would allow you to see under. The creak in the ceiling I heard moments earlier came from the side of the house my parents' bedroom was on, so I got down on my knees and looked under the crack of the door. I saw 2 bare feet facing the other side of the door. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The reality of the situation became so much more real, and I realized I wasn't ready to threaten or, God forbid, shoot someone. I quickly went downstairs and hid in the bathroom to call my dad. He still didn't pick up. I left another voicemail and called again and again. He never picked up. He must have had his phone set down somewhere. I finally called 911 as I should have done right away and whispered into the phone.
911, what is your emergency?
Detailing exactly what was happening. The operator told me to sit tight in the bathroom and not say a word. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and they approached the bathroom door, as if whoever it was somehow knew I went straight to the bathroom. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and there was a brief pause before a deep voice said, "What's up, kid?" I still remember that voice and those words so vividly. If I heard that voice today, I'd still recognize it immediately. I almost wanted to cry, that's how scared I was. I disobeyed what the operator told me and spoke. I said loud and clear, "I'm on the phone with the cops right now, and I have a gun." I put the operator on speaker as she asked if everything was okay. The man attempted to open the door, and when he realized it was locked, I heard him walk away. I heard the footsteps fade to silence and then the sound of a door slamming. It was the sound of the back door. I'm sure I breathed a sigh of relief, and from there on, I waited for the police to arrive. When they did, I felt like £1,000,000 had just lifted off my shoulders. After a thorough inspection of the house, inside and out, confirming that the man was gone, they asked if there was anywhere else I could stay that night, and I said yes, my uncle's house. We contacted my uncle, who came and spoke with the police. Then he took me back to his place. The thing that haunts me the most is that it was my fault. I could have prevented this. I left the door unlocked when I went to the storage building to investigate. clearly, that's when the man simply walked right into the house. Even with a rifle in my hands, I didn't feel safe at all. It was truly the most horrific experience of my life. I was home alone when my parents went away on a week-long anniversary trip. My sister had already moved out by this point, so I had to hold the fort. My parents' property is enclosed by woods and a dirt driveway leading to the road. The road is a quiet back road with equally sized properties running alongside it, all of them separated at a decent distance, so it's a really isolated feel up there. Everyone in town knows each other. You see familiar faces all the time, for the most part, at the gas station, the grocery store, and the bars, which I'd learn a few years later when I started going to them. Speaking of gas stations, this story starts one day while my parents were away. I was at a gas station filling up my tank when a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the pump next to mine. A man with a goatee stepped out, greeted me, and started filling his tank. In that town, it was normal for strangers to greet each other like that. He had his nozzle locked into the gas tank, and then he walked around to my side of the pump and went, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" I helped him to the best of my ability. He pulled out a notepad and started writing down the directions I gave him. It was very odd how he wouldn't just do that on his cell phone like anyone else would. He thanked me and asked if I'm from the area. I said yeah, I grew up here, and he said he's from out of town. He didn't specify where. He then went back to his side and put the nozzle back in the pump. He then asked my name, saying it's nice to meet you. I said my name's Kate. He said, "What a lovely name," and then got in his car. As I got into mine, I drove out first and turned left to go up the road back home. It was only a few minutes worth of driving before I was approaching our turn into the driveway. I slowed down, put my blinker on, and then turned right onto the property. It was at that moment I noticed the car behind me was that same black Jeep Cherokee. He passed me as I turned into our driveway. He went the complete opposite way that I told him to go to get to the interstate. As he passed me, he didn't slow down or anything, so it seemed that maybe he just forgot the directions I gave him and went the wrong way. I let myself inside and went about the rest of my day doing whatever. I think it was that night that I was going out to meet up with my friends when I stepped outside, walked to my car, and heard the sound of footsteps nearby. Like I said, the house is enclosed by woods, and this was in the middle of the summertime. It could have been any number of animals, so I didn't investigate. I just got in my car and left. But when I got back home hours later and walked from my car to the house, a man's voice from out somewhere in the woods called out, "Kate." I got the chills as I looked around and then, in a panic, rushed to open the front door. I slammed it shut and sat on the couch to breathe. The neighbors all knew my name, but the houses are not on top of each other, so it's a bit of a walk, and there was no reason for one of them to call my name like that, like a creep, and not identify themselves. I decided to call my parents to tell them, and their explanation was it must have been one of the neighbors, and they'll probably knock on the door. I didn't tell them about the encounter at the gas station. The next day, which was a Saturday, I stayed home most of the day. Later that night, I once again was going out to meet with my friends. After getting ready and everything, I went outside to my car and started it. It was at that moment I realized I forgot my purse in the house, so I went back inside, grabbed my purse, and walked back outside. As I was walking over to the driver's door, I noticed footsteps leaving imprints in the grass walking in the direction of the woods. The car was still running, so I was hesitant to turn it off or get in it, so I walked back inside and looked out the window. There was no one in sight. I was seriously spooked. I called one of my friends to see if she could come to pick me up instead, and she said she would, but that meant I'd have to sit inside by myself, basically waiting, and I did just that. I waited, peering out the window to make sure no one was out there. Eventually, I saw a car come down the road and stop in front of the house, honking the horn. I went outside, and it was my friend's car. We both got in and sped away down the street to the bar. I felt so much better after that. After we left, I just had a really bad feeling that something was going to happen. I told my friends, and they were convinced someone was trespassing on my parents' property, probably with malicious intent. We stayed out super late. I ended up sleeping over at a friend's house that night, and the next morning I woke up early to go back home to check the place out. I drove back there, still in my clothes from the night before. When I pulled up to the house, I noticed the front door was left ajar. I went back to my car and got my phone to call my parents, but I saw I had a voicemail, so I played it right away. It was from the sheriff's department. They were calling to inform me of a break-in the night before, which was a shock. I had to search the house for any missing items, and there were plenty. A lot of my mom's jewelry and my dad's watches, among other things. But the most disturbing thing was that the intruder must have forced entry through a back window because the wood around the window was all splintered and cracked. I ended up calling my parents and letting them know what happened, but they'd already heard from the sheriff's department. I ended up staying with a friend the rest of that week until my parents returned home. We never saw that man again. I just knew it had to be him, the same man I met at the gas station.